right, so thank you everyone for joining us today. And it'll be my pleasure to spend this time with you. And as well, we are lucky to have Richie Rai from Microsoft, the National Security Sales and Channel Lead for the SMB, the Small and Medium Business Channel. Sorry. And Richie is going to show us today how we can prepare ourselves security-wise for AI with Purview. Along the lines of we need to consider securing our data in this age of AI. And with Microsoft Purview, we will be able to do that. First, I'm going to present to you a couple of novelties or things that are happening here at IT Cloud that you might not necessarily be aware of. First is our Altitude convention for this year in 2024 in Toronto, which is taking place on May 7th. So if any of you have not registered yet, please do so, as we will have a fun-filled day of activities and workshops and webinars, seminars, and people that you can meet and greet and come and meet to other vendors. And I believe we will also have a few folks from Microsoft that are going to be there as well. So it shall be a full day. And as well, it is free. So come on down and see us. And as well, for those of you who are perhaps nearer to the Montreal region or want to come and see us in Quebec, we do have the Altitude Convention in Laval, Quebec, but that one is taking part, later on in May, on May 24th and 25th. And those will be 2 full days of activities. And as well, we're going to be holding a full day on Copilot on the 23rd. So come and look at our IT Cloud website where you can find all the details and you can register for these events. Here, I'd like to share with you a promotion that is ongoing at the time with Microsoft and IT Cloud. Microsoft have been generous enough to acquire a bundle of licenses that will permit you partners to migrate some of your clients who are presently not in 365 at the moment, but are thinking of making the jump to the Microsoft Cloud. So with these migration licenses, you'll be able to take some of your clients that are at the moment with their on-prem email servers, on-prem file servers, or it could be hosted services somewhere else through another provider. It could be their ISP or whatever the case may be, or they could just be on another platform such as Google Workspace. So these licenses will permit you to migrate these folks up to the Microsoft Cloud and free of charge. So click on the URL in the link. It is clickable. The deck is shared live, and that way you can fill out the form, and we can make sure that these licenses become available to you. You must fill in your request before June 30th, and after you receive the redeem code for the licenses, you must use them before December 20th. As well, we now have a new booking link for the pre-sales Microsoft specialists here at IT Cloud. So once again, either scan the QR code or click on the link, and you can book some time with the specialists team here at IT Cloud, and we can look at, can, uh, counseling you on certain products, certain ways of approaching situations. This is a free service, and we do this before, necessarily you guys having to choose the solution, buy the solution, and then come time to implement it, and might not necessarily do what you want it to do, and then you end up contacting our support service department only to realize that it wasn't necessarily the product that you thought it was, or not necessarily fit the bill for that situation at that moment. So don't hesitate. Book a meeting with us, and we can certainly help you in that. And as well, we are now on YouTube. We're promoting our YouTube channel at this time. This presentation that we're doing today will be available on YouTube, as well as what is available now is past webinars, and as well our Excellence Program series, whether it be the Azure Excellence Program or the Microsoft Business Premium and Copilot program. Those sessions are available on our YouTube channel at the moment. So any webinars or other videos that were available through the IT Cloud Partner Portal will now be made available directly on this YouTube channel for you. And like I said before, we are thrilled to have Richie with us. So I'm going to stop sharing, and Richie is going to take off and lead us in the presentation.
Thank you, Sylvain. I appreciate it. Just getting the presentation loaded. Can you give me a thumbs up when you can see it? Yep. Awesome. Thank you. Team, thanks for making the time for this. IT Cloud, as always, thanks for having me and having this conversation around, I would say, arguably the most topical conversation that we're having with all of our customers. And I'm sure this is the case for many of you as well. Traditionally or in the past, we haven't really spent as much time on the data security story. And of course, you can imagine with the wave of AI, this has now become by far the number one conversation. And I know many of you are, of course, having conversations with your customers around Copilot for M365. And I know that's been something IT Cloud and Microsoft has been pushing with the channel ecosystem for some time as well. I know we're seeing mixed results in the sense of penetration rates across our customers. And a lot of what we have been saying for the last couple months, especially for myself, is that, hey, there's a bunch of steps that we need to go in action and address before we get to that point. And so the idea of this session in the next 40, 45 minutes, the way I'd love to spend it with you all is to walk through the core story, which is all around securing the data in the age of AI. And we'll talk through the entire story. I see the group that we have today. And so any questions that you have, team, please either come off of mute, raise your hand, or just drop your question in the chat. I'll try to address as many of them as I can in real time. And we'll go from there. So with that said, let's get right into it, maybe with some setting the table, if you will. Microsoft runs an annual report called our Data Security Index. And in our most recent edition for 2023, a couple of interesting nuggets, to say the least. The first one, and I think this isn't a surprise to anybody, but just a number of data security incidents that we're seeing. And by the way, I have a really good example in a few slides that will go through a real life scenario of exactly how it played out. Number two, and arguably the most important concern that we're seeing, is all around how top of mind security and privacy is. And this is it's never happened at this scale ever before, right? So when we think about deploying AI and using it, there are so many things to be considered before that. And the number one thing on the top of the list is security and privacy. And of course, that's where we're going to be spending a lot of our time talking through. Last but not least, fragmented solutions. In the same report, we conducted a survey and we noticed that there's an average of 16 tools that even SMBs, our smallest customers, are using to address security, privacy, risk, and compliance. That's incredible. And so not only does that negate your ability to be effective because of everything you're managing and juggling it at the same time, it also results in more data security incidents because you don't have visibility and our customers don't have visibility on the end-to-end story of what's actually happening in their organization. And so we've seen at least a 2.x increase in the amount of data security incidents that these organizations are facing. Now, if you think about organizations with 40 tools or double that to 80, which by the way is the average for a lot of mid-sized organizations, what does that look like? What type of visibility do you have in your organization? And furthermore, how are you expected to grow and adopt the newest technologies when internally you haven't really figured out what the best ways to manage it, right? And so if you distill that and double click on, okay, what's going on? We'll use an analogy to drive the point home. So you imagine you have your digital crown jewels as an organization in a safe or a vault, whatever the case may be, and it's all closed off. There are a plethora of items that you need to consider to ensure that that data, your digital crown jewels, are safe in that vault. The very first one is, hey, access. I need to ensure that I implement the appropriate configuration so that only certain people that have access should be allowed near that data. But then what happens if the folks are already inside the vault? How do I ensure that I can still prevent that data from being exfiltrated? And that's where we talk about data leakage and data exfiltration, which we'll spend a bunch of time talking about. This is at the core of the concerns with AI, and we'll double click into it. Before we do, would love to walk everyone through a scenario, real world actually scenario and story of corporate espionage that took place in the last 10 years or so. And again, it happened over a period of time, and exactly how it happened and how this is proliferating at a rapid pace today. So between 2012 and 2018, we'll use the suspect or the felon, I guess you could call them now, given that they were charged. Between 2012 and 2018, Jane Doe worked at two different organizations in fairly privileged positions. She was paid by a foreign government to extract IP, proprietary information, from the companies that she worked at in exchange for a handsome sum of money. Of course, Jane complied and agreed. And so at one point in time during this period, she then tried to copy all of the proprietary data from the first company that she worked at onto an external hard drive, found that it was all blocked by the DLP policy at company A, which again, pretty good, right? Got blocked. And so was that the end of it? Of course not. She found a loophole to exfiltrate that same information, and she uploaded it to her personal cloud storage, and she did this at both companies. So after copying it over to the cloud storage, she then copied it to an external hard drive at the company, the second company that she worked at after getting laid off at company A. Turns out there's an investigation that had begun. She was under investigation herself, and turns out she was at the root cause of this. And as a result, she was terminated from both companies following an investigation by authorities, not even internally at the company. And so in 2021, she got convicted, as I was saying, and the intellectual property that she had stolen cost approximately $120 million to develop. This is an extreme scenario of what can happen. But at the end of the day, what we know is employees generally, not in this case, but generally have the best intentions. They do not mean to do most things maliciously. And so whether it is intentional or unintentional, how do we set up the four walls and everything within it in the right way so that we don't have to be in the news and become the subject of a case study that ends up on a slide in the next 5 years? And so what actually did end up happening the way it should have is the companies had no visibility into the sensitive data, and DLP didn't flag the fact that this is a repeat offender because this happened multiple times, right? And this is where things like insider risk solutions come into play. And then ultimately, the collaboration that she was granted was abuse, which is the worst case. So this is what's happening. Now it's proliferating. So what is Microsoft's story to help and address all of this in the context of today? I'll start with this slide. And maybe it's a slide you've seen, maybe it isn't. This is the Microsoft security portfolio in one slide. And I generally ask, hey, how many of you have, how many of you can name all 6 workloads? And I rarely do I get any hand up, which is all good because it's been evolving at a rapid pace. What I'll double click on, and the point of our conversation today is going to be on the data protection, the data governance, and the data management side, which is Purview, still a part of the story. And another thing, and another theme that you'll actually notice with me over the next hour is that I'm really not going to allude to any licenses, and rarely will I speak to features unless it's in the context of data security. And the idea here is we want to ensure that we can have value first conversations with our customers, as opposed to leading with maybe how we've been doing this traditionally, which is let's lead with SKUs because we sell the SKUs and then we know what to upsell. At this day and age, as our customers are looking to transform, they're looking for trusted partners that will join them in their journey. And the more we can be consultative with them in our approach, the more effective we'll be at landing that message and ultimately building that trusted relationship that we are so focused on. So this is the story, but this doesn't say much. It tells me that, yeah, Microsoft has a bunch of stuff. This is cool. But Richie, you're telling me you have Business Standard and Business Basic and Business Premium. We have Copilot for M365 now. You're talking to me about Purview. I know Defender exists by looking on this slide. There's Intune, there's Entra. Oh, by the way, we also have Copilot for Security, which is another AI security product that we announced as of April 1st, which went GA. There is so much. And in this segment, more than any other, we need to simplify it. So how do we go simplify it? And this is what I would call our money slide. And I hope some of this resonates with you. And if you have any feedback, I'd love to take them as well. One of the things that we've noticed is when a customer or any organization is looking to adopt AI, we realize that they need to go on a journey, and that journey we categorize as an adoption framework, which means there is a point in time at which you begin, and there is a journey, and there is an end state, in a sense, at the point at which you adopt technology. And if you see this slide, you'll see that the last step is unlocking that productivity and creativity, in this case with Copilot for M365. And what we're telling customers today is, hey, if you have Business Premium, and if you have Defender for Business, which of course IT Cloud has a promo around today as well, you're good to go. Defender for Business, add Copilot, you're good to go. And we have been doing this across the board, across all partner types, across all customer organization sizes. Why aren't we seeing the uptake that we expect? And the bet we're making is, well, there's a really big conversation and there's a gap that isn't being addressed. And that gap is all around securing and protecting your data. And if we can't have that conversation with our customers, they're just going to be more resistant and hesitant to adopt AI. Some may still move forward with it, but might end up, again, as a case study down the road, which we don't want. How can we have that conversation today? And so this session is all focused on this conversation. We are not saying, hey, let's go sell every single SKU, add them all up, and have the customers pay a ridiculous amount of money to go do that. It's more so to say, let's focus on outcomes. As a result of outcomes, let's meet them where they're at. And let's just ensure that they're considering all of these items. Some of it may be Microsoft, some of it may not be Microsoft, but I can't think of any other vendor that would address this entire story end to end. It frankly doesn't exist. And so if we know this story is here, we don't need to actually dig into all the solutions. We need to be able to tell that story and then understand, based on the customer we're talking to, which story is appropriate and relevant. So that said, now let's double click on the Purview piece, and then we'll get into the actual story and the conversation that we would love for each of you to have with your customers. And if you're already having it, hopefully give you a few more nuggets that you can use and employ in your arsenal with the next time you talk to your customers about this conversation. Let's double click on Purview for a second before getting right into it. What is Purview? If you may remember, compliance early on started off as advanced compliance. That's what we called it. Then we created the branding around it, which was Purview. But when you think about Purview, it's fairly synonymous with E5 compliance. And I know there's some capabilities of that within Business Premium as well, not to the same extent as what you see on this slide. So when you think across data security, data governance, and a risk and compliance posture, there's a whole lot here. And there's a whole lot that you also don't see on the slide because this is specific to the AI story. And so what is the Microsoft Purview story around this in the context of what we're talking to our customers about today? And that's exactly where we'll spend time. Quick points on Purview all up. And I think when we think about what's Microsoft's differentiator, there's three things that come to mind. The first one is having the visibility across the entire data state. So whether you're using Microsoft or you're on a multi-cloud solution, you're leveraging SaaS applications, whether they're first party or third party, regardless, you have end-to-end visibility on your data ecosystem. And this hasn't always been the case. And point in case is actually point number two, which is whether your data is structured, so it's in a SQL database or a Mongo database, or it's a data lake or Fabric, or it's unstructured altogether in the form of, our Office apps, it doesn't matter. Purview extends to all of them. Not only that, we used to have Azure Purview and M365 Purview as two different stories. We've brought them both together to be able to tell this one story, which is why that's why we see a lot of wins, because we don't see a lot of competition on anyone that can have that end-to-end story. So that securing across all data types, super, super valuable. And then last but not least, it's the detecting the risks across all clouds and all apps, right? So whether you're using Box and Dropbox, Google Drive, GitHub, it doesn't really matter. Across insider risk, information protection, DLP, and everything in between, it extends to all three scenarios. Something important to consider as well, on top of that, we talked about it extends to everything, but what about AI? Is Purview only for Microsoft Copilot or Copilot for M365? The answer is no. Whether you're leveraging Copilot and or you have built your own OpenAI internal chat GPT instance, or you're using a Llama as a third-party application, doesn't matter. It extends to first party and third party. Again, you can see how the story comes together pretty quickly. So that said, let's get into that data security conversation that we should be having with our customers today. And the hope is, again, that you have been armed with some of the ammo that you would need to have that conversation with your customers and just be more confident about it overall. First slide, classic Microsoft deck. We'll always do some level setting on what's happening in the industry. Of course, none of this is new, but I think we do recognize that, hey, look at the pace at which this has been evolving, and that only brings forward some risks and concerns with them. What are the three risks in the data context, or the data security context in Purview today? Again, if you reference that data security index report, three key risks that we keep seeing come up over and over again from organizations. First one, 43% of the organizations feel like they don't have the controls needed to detect and mitigate the risk in the first place. And guess what? A lot of them have already paid for it. So they don't really know from Microsoft what they own that they aren't able to leverage. Number two, 35% of them saying, hey, I fear I don't have the appropriate controls to protect the data that's shared in AI, right? And this is the whole data oversharing conversation, which we'll get into a little bit, which I know is probably the number one conversation we're having. And then last but not least, it's all around regulatory pressure. As we see AI get regulated more and more, how many companies and global companies are we going to see start getting fined, right? Just for not having the appropriate controls in place. And what does that mean for our smaller customers, right? What does that mean for the mom and pop shops or even the 50 to 500 user organizations? What does that mean for them? They certainly don't have the funds to go and address this. So how do we go address it? Well, there's three things. And again, everything's easier in groups of three. So I like the way this is structured. The very first one, data leakage. How do I ensure as an organization that users don't leak any sensitive data to AI applications? How do I ensure that if I am on ChatGPT or I am on Bing Chat and I'm typing in something and I ask a question, that it actually doesn't get a response? Number two, connected to that, data oversharing, and probably and arguably the number one conversation around the security concerns with AI is all around data oversharing. How do I ensure that users can't access sensitive information via the AI apps that they're not authorized to view? Some people may be, most people won't. So how do I prevent that from happening? And then last but not least, it's all around non-compliance usage. You saw the scenario and the case study that we walked through earlier in the conversation. That's exactly what this is. Insider threats, non-compliance usage, insider trading, all of that will be classified under this bucket. May not be as pervasive as number one and number two, but it really depends on the organizations you're talking to and the industries that they're in. And before we get into double clicking into those three components, which we will, I really like sharing this slide. And this is our shared responsibility model. What is a shared responsibility model? Anytime you've gone asked by a customer, hey, is Microsoft compliant with this? Or is another cloud vendor compliant with that? The answer is really, it depends. It depends because it's a shared responsibility. So what is this slide saying? As you look across AI adoption, and so in this case, it's categorized across AI usage, AI application, AI platform. That's your y-axis. On the x-axis, you have cloud adoption. So how much of my workloads and on my AI data and everything around AI is on-prem, right? So it's purely bring your own. How much of it is leveraging the Microsoft platform? And how much of it is leveraging Microsoft SaaS solution? So Copilot being one instance of that. What this slide is saying is the more we adopt and work on a vendor's technology and the deeper in we go, the more the responsibility shifts to Microsoft. So according to that, everything in your AI platform and your application, just about everything minus the AI plugins and data connections piece, falls on Microsoft. Microsoft bears that responsibility and will always have all boxes checked. But the customer still has a couple things that they need to manage themselves, and the rest of it is a shared responsibility. Versus if you are doing a bring your own model, every single piece here is the responsibility of the customer, right? So, hey, if you're not leveraging the cloud, there's really not much else to be said. Another way of saying this, again, in the age of Copilot for M365, what does that look like? Well, anything that relates to the access of the AI apps, anything that relates to protecting and governing the data that's entered and created by the AI apps, and anything that's the change management component associated with AI apps, that responsibility falls on the organization. It's about a quarter of the responsibility. The rest of it falls on Microsoft, anything related to the platform. And so this is a good conversation to have with customers too, if they come up, which is, hey, how does the compliance narrative work when we think about AI apps? How do I ensure that my data is not leaked, right? And those are the core components which we'll get into. But I really, really like the shared responsibility angle and the conversation because it resonates from everything that I've seen so far. So let's go back and talk about the three biggest concerns and how we go address them. We'll start with data leakage, which again is all around users having access to data which they leak to the data or they leak to the AI apps, which we don't want to see. So how do we go address this? It comes down to three things once again. First one is having visibility into the prompts that contain the sensitive data. How many of you can raise your hands up today and say, hey, I can tell an organization today exactly how many prompts they are using across all the employees, how many of those prompts contain sensitive data? There's no way of doing that today. Well, there is. It's called AI Hub, and you'll see what that looks like in just a second. Number two, creating the appropriate policies to prevent this data from getting leaked in the first place, whether it's within Microsoft apps, whether it's to a SharePoint, whether it's to a USB drive, or whether it's to a personal OneDrive. How do we go leverage DLP capabilities to make that happen? And by the way, data loss prevention, it's been a word and it's been an acronym for quite some time. Did you know that we're already at 4 different DLP types that Microsoft offers? One of them is in private preview, which is DLP for third-party apps, which is what you'll see in a second. We also have endpoint DLP. You have DLP for Teams, you have DLP for Office. This suite will also continue to grow rapidly. And then last but not least, how do we ensure that we apply the adaptive protection? Because not all users are the same. We may need executives to have access to certain data that the rest of the employees don't, or frontline workers having access to certain case files that the rest of the organization is not privy to. So how do we implement adaptive protection? All of this to prevent data leakage. So let's see what that looks like. If we are in the Compliance Center, or now it's called Microsoft Purview portal, purview.microsoft.com or compliance.microsoft.com. You should know this if you've been talking about data security, just like security.microsoft.com. We now have the AI Hub, which is in private preview. And this is what we were referencing. The amount of prompts that have been inputted by employees across all Microsoft and non-Microsoft tools. This is super, super powerful. So if I start using my laser here, you can see here on the bottom right, Google Bard, now called Gemini, of course, ChatGPT, Bing Chat, Copilot for M365. How many prompts have my employees used? And then furthermore, how many of those prompts contain sensitive data? So I can see that, hey, with Copilot for M365, of the 15,000 prompts, over half of them contain high risk information. Well, that's a red flag. Imagine an organization, and this can be an executive or anyone in IT. It is fairly intuitive for them to have access to this level of information and visibility in their organization. How much better is their decision making? This puts them in a totally different realm than how things are operating today, which is I have no idea about how any of this stuff works. Is it just easy with Microsoft where you buy the solution, you turn on the switch and you're good to go? Of course not. That's not Microsoft, right? You don't just buy and you're ready to go turn it on. It takes work. But this is why each of you have the businesses that you do. You are the advisor, so you would help them with not just a conversation, but bringing this to life. And as we go do that, the customers reap the rewards, which ultimately then flows down to yourselves. So we have AI Hub, and I can double click on any single prompt within AI Hub to evaluate what those conversations are. So within Activity Explorer, I can get that visibility and see any data risks that may reside in any of those prompts. Doesn't matter who prompted it, but the metadata as well as which AI application was used is all visible to me. So let's switch gears a little bit and let's talk about, now that we have gained visibility, how do we implement it with DLP so that the right folks have access to the right items? So this is an offline file. It's an FAQ for a highly confidential project called Project Obsidian. As you can see, team, on the top left, this is an offline file. So this isn't even live. And despite that, the second it loaded, a policy tip was provided, which is saying that, hey, we automatically label this document because it contains Project Obsidian in it. And we know based on the policy that we have created, anything with Project Obsidian should be classified as highly confidential. And so what if a user copies this first paragraph and they try to paste it in Google Bard or Google Gemini, for instance? What's going to happen? Well, you're going to turn on Purview DLP, and very quickly after you type in the prompt, you're going to get this from Purview DLP. Your organization has blocked as the information that you have provided is not able to be submitted. Look at how powerful that is, and that's all within the workflow. That is how you prevent data loss. And this is, again, just one example. There's many more scenarios we can go through, but it shows you the depth and breadth of the capabilities. So let's now dig into number 2, which is all around data oversharing. How do we ensure that we don't get information or the AI is not spitting out information that it should not be sharing to certain users, right? Again, 3 things. It all starts with first detecting the prompts, and we're going to continue down the theme of Project Obsidian, and we leverage communication compliance for that. Once we can detect them, we then know where we apply the sensitivity labels. And again, if we use automatic sensitivity labeling, we have thousands of SharePoint sites. You're certainly going to need that. How do we go and apply the labels, in this case, to Project Obsidian, so that access is restricted only to, in this case, again, the project members? And then last but not least, we once again need to create the DLP policies to prevent the data from getting exfiltrated, right? So we use DLP again, and you see how information protection and DLP are just mainstays in this conversation. So again, we're in the Purview portal. We are in the Communication Compliance Center, and within it, I can see all active conversations that have taken place, right? This is the visibility I get. And I can see that Alex had submitted a prompt where he said, hey, what are the latest files on Project Obsidian? So now maybe I want to double click into that because something doesn't seem right. So now if a user has access to Project Obsidian, say it's somebody on the Project Obsidian user team, and I say, hey, write a short FAQ on Project Obsidian in Word, which is of course using Copilot for M365, guess what? It's going to spit it out. But because it knows it's confidential, it'll say, hey, this has been automatically applied a highly confidential label because it contains Project Obsidian. Great, we know it's working. But what happens when a user that doesn't have access to it goes into, in this case, Microsoft Teams chat and says, hey, what is Project Obsidian about? I'm just curious. And what's the response? I'm sorry, I couldn't find any specific information about Project Obsidian. So this is information protection DLP working together. And for this exact same scenario, a user that does have access to it, you are going to get the responses, right? And it also reference all the items that are pertaining to it. And not only that, as it references each of the documents, in this case related to Project Obsidian, it automatically labels those documents as well, right? You can't see it for the rest, but you see here it says confidential. And so whether your data is at rest, it's in transit, it sits in a SharePoint library or not, you shared it with someone externally or not, the labels are inherited automatically, and the most restrictive label is what the document inherits, just to ensure that the data security is in fact in place. And then last but not least, let's talk about non-compliance usage. This one, like I said in the past, is likely not going to be one we come across as much, though if you have organizations in highly regulated industries, it may be a more topical conversations that you might see. How does this work? Well, similar story, right? Communication compliance to detect the prompts. We've already seen that. We'll double click into it regardless. Number 2, retention policies, deletion policies. All of that is within data lifecycle management. Again, these are all just Microsoft words. So I would stick away and not pay too much attention and focus to the Microsoft naming convention as much as what is it intended to do. So retention, deletion, we leverage that in conjunction with Microsoft Audit, right? And then when we need to conduct an investigation, whether it's externally for a case or it's just an internal investigation, we go leverage e-discovery. I'd love to ask, how many of you can raise your hands up and say, hey, my customers have come to me with an e-discovery case and we've talked about Microsoft e-discovery. I guarantee you the answer is 0 because 1, it's the not knowing what's included, but two, this is just likely not something that comes up as much as what we think. I'll pause here because there's a question in the chat. What size of company would use this? Really, really good question. All sizes, right? The question to a CEO of a 5-person shop is, well, do you have any sensitive data that you're concerned about? If you are in business and you have customers, you likely have sensitive information. If you are then looking to leverage AI in any sense, well, you likely want to ensure that the customer information is not leaked anywhere. In fact, I'm talking to an organization right now. It's two co-founders. They've built IP. It's all around securing cars remotely. And the first thing they came to us with is, hey, we don't have any money, but we need to go conduct a security assessment. And they have no money. It's pre-seed even. That's how important it is for them because their IP is just worth that much. So it has nothing to do with size of company. It's all about what are their business operations, what type of data do they have, and from everything that I've seen so far and the conversations we have with customers, this is relevant to just about everybody. It's a matter of do they know it exists? And if so, how do they go action it? And so we'll spend a bit of time on the packaging piece as well in terms of what's available today and what's coming long term. But I wanted to ensure that we can at least have the conversation and then you have IT cloud support along with myself and Microsoft to go and address this. So I can't see the name because that's unknown user, but hopefully that answer was helpful. So I'll breeze through this piece and then we'll get into the next steps and actually customer conversations. Once again, I'm in communication compliance, and so I can detect all the non-compliant content, and of course it all gets flagged. And so Adele was having a very interesting conversation with Copilot in Word, where she was trying to manipulate the Contoso stock. In this demo example, she wanted to make it a weak stock, and so communication compliance detected the intent and it collected it as evidence. And so then we go to create a policy, and you see here it applies to Microsoft 365 Copilot interactions. And now we can go apply the appropriate retention and deletion labels so that regardless of Adele, in this case, deleting that prompt or not, I will have access to it. And then when I want to go conduct an e-discovery investigation, again, all in Purview Center, I can go do that. I have all the metadata, I have all the prompts, I have the number of prompts and anything else I need to aid me in my investigation. So I'll wrap this piece by, and I'll go back to this slide just so that you see it one more time. If there's anything you take away from this conversation, would love for it to just be around asking questions, which I'll just land in a bit as well, around these 3 items. How are you addressing data leakage? How are you addressing data oversharing? How are you addressing non-compliance usage? And I would be shocked if a customer said, I am not, and none of these 3 things are important to me, because then the conversation would be around, well, what's their growth strategy? How are they looking to build? Because this world is now all about data, I think, as we all know. And in the world that runs on data, organizations need to ensure that the number one priority, especially in the AI age, where forget internal threats, what about external threats, right? It's all around data and they're leveraging AI. The attackers are 10 steps ahead, 10 steps faster with AI. How do we get them and meet them where they're at? So what are the conversations I can go have with my customers about this today? And hopefully this will help remediate the questions around the size of customers is relevant to, because hopefully you can tell it doesn't matter. These questions aren't relevant to a certain size organization. You don't have to be TD Bank that has a records management team or a chief privacy officer who gets assigned these questions, right? This can be addressed to a CEO of a small business. Starting with, does your organization know the types of sensitive information it has? And you can even take it down even a notch further. How much sensitive data do you have? Do you know where it lives? How much of it is on-prem? How much of it is in the cloud? How are you securing it today, right? That's category number 1. Category number 2, how do you go and protect it today across your environments? And if you recall at the beginning of the presentation, you saw that we're seeing in small businesses an average of 16 solutions. 16 vendors are being leveraged by a customer, a small business, to go and solve their security compliance needs, because they feel I need a point solution that does this one thing. I need another that does this one thing. But if you have a bundle, something you're already paying for, frankly, that does all of it and will show you how to enable the rest of it, Why would I not go use that, right? And then last but not least, again, likely not going to be the first one you prioritize with your customers, but may come up if they are big enough, all around insider risks. How do you go manage that today? And this sets up a really good framework and template to have further conversations around, well, you're looking to adopt AI, let's pump the brakes, let's address all of this. Once we have this addressed, or at least there's a plan in place, may not be with Microsoft. If we're on this call, though, the hope is we can go land the right conversations around Microsoft. How do we go bring that to life, right? So from a customer standpoint, we want to see them do three things, right? And frankly, even many of you in your own organizations may think about doing this internally, and it's just reinforcing the themes you've already heard me talk about today. Discover sensitive data. It's all about data classification, AI Hub in private preview, as you saw today. Prevent data leakage. So you saw an endpoint DLP policy. I mentioned that there's DLP for third-party apps, which is super, super exciting. And then there's also data labeling with information protection. How do we go bring this all together? Now, the question from all of you is going to be, well, Richie, this is all great. How do I take advantage of this today? My customer has business basic, or they have business standard. Maybe they have business premium. Maybe I'm working on business premium. Do they have this today? And again, I trust all of you. So I trust you to know that overnight business premium wasn't just fed, 20 different features all around data security and purview. So how do we go fill that gap today? I have a good answer. Hopefully you think the same thing. And there's a short-term answer and a long-term answer. And let's go talk about the short-term answer first. In the near term, excited to share that as of 3 business days ago, Microsoft announced that our compliance mini bundles. So let's walk through licensing. And I hate talking about licensing because I know a lot of the times the conversations get stuck on this, but I'll try to make it clear and try to clarify. We have full ME5 that a customer can buy with all E5 capabilities. Great. Customer can also buy E5 compliance. So a customer can be on E3 and say, hey, I want E5 compliance because I want all of Purview. And if you want all of Purview, everything that I just shared in this session today, that's E5 compliance, $15 per user per month. We realized that you can have a customer that's already paying for business premium. They may be paying another $40 per month on all the other solutions. So we're not even going to get into the cost consolidation conversation. We're just going to talk about value add. You can't expect a customer to pay for business premium and then pay another $15 for E5 compliance. Very few customers, especially in SMB, would opt to go do that. So what is the middle ground? The middle ground, and this is the coaching, is we lead with information protection and governance. That was a terrible square. We lead with IP&G. Now, what are these three SKUs? Microsoft took E5 compliance and broke it down into 3 mini bundles. This has existed for years, by the way. We don't lead with these bundles as much with our enterprise customers. We directly go to ME5, and or in a few cases, we talk about E3 plus E5 compliance, but generally 90% of opportunities, it's full E5. So this hasn't come out, but this has existed for years. We have just said you can now add on these mini bundles to business premium. And as you know, these are E5 mini bundles. This is called E5 information protection and governance. The second one is E5 e-discovery and audit. And third is E5 insider risk management. So what do we know? What's the prevailing thought? Well, if you want to add an E5 capability, you need to have an E5 SKU. So if you don't have E3, how can you go add these E5 mini bundles? And that's exactly what we changed. We said, hey, business premium is totally fine. That has the requisites that you need to take advantage of this. So now you have business premium, which many of your customers already have, or maybe you're working on getting them to that point. We can add E5 information protection and governance for $7. And most of the capabilities that you saw me talk about, Defender for Cloud Apps, we didn't even get into, but that alone is worth $10 per user per month. To communications DLP, endpoint DLP, automatic labeling, records management, message encryption, sensitivity labels with machine-based learning, trainable classifiers, which is not even on here. All of that is in $7 per user per month. This is the short-term solution. And again, you did hear me talk about insider risk as well. So that's also available. I'm just double clicking on IP&G, information protection and governance, because I feel this is the most relevant today. What's a long-term solution? We took this up the channels, and the IT Cloud team knows this fairly well. For months, we kept pushing and saying, hey, as Richie, I can go have and talk about this presentation and then come back and say, hey, well, let's go talk about E5 with our customers. It just would not resonate. So as we speak, the team is working on what does E5 compliance for business mean? In other words, you know that we have Defender for Business, E5 security capabilities for small businesses, and that's what Defend for Business is. That's what the promo is all around today. So the question is, what does Purview for Business look like? What capabilities would you want to see from these bundles in Business Premium? That's exactly what they're working on today. We're having conversations with partners, getting feedback from the channel, are internalizing what are the top capabilities that we would need to see, and based on all that, reach a decision with respect to what is that story, because we know there are other solutions out there for $2, $3, $4 per user per month. I mean, they'll do a fraction of this, but they'll say, hey, migration, records management, information protection, pay us $2 a month, we'll get it done. You just saw, hopefully, over the last 40 minutes, that it's way more than that. It's way deeper, and there's nothing in the market that addresses it end to end. And so that's the conversation that we need to have. And so we need to arm you with the right tools to be able to have that conversation confidently. So today, we can lead with IP&G. You're literally one of the very few cohorts that have heard this, because I just started leveraging this talk track this week. In fact, this is the first deck that has a slide. I think, Sylvain, you haven't even seen the slide because I just got access to it earlier today and I added it for this session because I thought it'd be relevant. But we're going to start leading with this. And as you have conversations around Defender for Business, you can talk about data security as part of that, right? So it all comes together. And then in the very near short term, if that's what your next question is, well, today, what can I go do? I'm talking to customers about Copilot for M365. Here's another one. We have now restricted SharePoint search. I don't know how many of you are familiar with this. Restricted SharePoint search, that's a mouthful right there, is a free tool that customers can go use to review and audit their sites, and it extends to 100 SharePoint sites, right? So by default, restricted SharePoint search will be off. If customers decide to enable it, both Copilot and non-Copilot users will be able to find it and use the content from up to 100 SharePoint sites and libraries. So the flow would go, hey, we do an assessment. We're ready for Copilot for M365. You ready to deploy? Great. Let's go enable SharePoint search. You see here, Business Premium. You already saw my entire talk track around this, so I won't spend too much time on it. And you see on the add-ons here, what are these add-ons? Surprise, surprise. These are the add-ons that I just talked about, right? The 3 mini bundles. E5 Information Protection Governance, E5 E-Discovery and Audit, E5 Insider Risk Management. If I was you, I would lead with the first one because I think it has the capabilities that you need. And if it's used, disable restricted SharePoint search. This is, again, a temporary solution to go address it, and it comes with Copilot for M365. So with all that said, what are the next steps? You already saw the questions that we can ask. You already saw that there is a new program and offer with Defender for Business with IT Cloud, and you've seen the conversation that you can have with customers today based on what I shared. And so next steps, conduct that assessment, whatever that assessment is, whether it's first party, whether it's through IT Cloud, whether it's through Microsoft. There's tons of those programs, as you may be aware. Number two, if customers are interested, they can leverage a Purview trial. And so I dropped the link for that in there as well. And then last but not least, any of your key opportunities, please get connected with the IT Cloud team. Please share with them what data security conversations you're having with which customers and what the potential opportunity is. And I'll put my hand up and say, hey, if you have, in totality, 3 customers across everybody on this call, for instance, how do we then go and ensure that I can support you and join you on these customer calls to have this conversation in parallel with you, right? So that offer is open and it's available. And so with that said, I am at the end of the conversation. Hopefully there's a couple items and nuggets that you could take away that you can maybe start to action with your customers. And once again, thank you for your time. Not sure if we want to leave the remaining 9 minutes for Q&A. IT Cloud team, I'll pass it over to you.
All right. Yes, we do have a couple of other things that we'd like to share with the partners. But thank you definitely, Richie, for the presentation. And I am not upset with you at all for keeping that last little nugget, which is definitely an improvement, because it is true that we have had that discussion on, okay, standard is just provides us with really, not much security, or if none at all. Business premium is a huge jump above that, but unfortunately, there was still quite a leap in security from business premium to an ME5. I'm super happy to see those bundles now that we can get as an add-on to business premium, where we can
Yep.
definitely ramp up the security on that. That is fantastic news.
Love it, love it, and hopefully the rest of the channel feels the same way. But
Yeah, yeah,
keep the feedback coming.
yeah. Perfect. Let me just all right. So I'm just going to reshare my screen. And let me go to the right slide. So that's actually really good news. I'm actually quite excited about that. That finally, and I'm glad to hear that you guys as well are working on improving the value of business premium even more. So, which is definitely good news. And I did like your answer about when someone was asking, what size of company would you use this?
Yeah.
Security is for every company. It definitely, to me anyway, personally, it doesn't matter what size you are. And you're absolutely right, Richie, when you say, if you're paying your suppliers through electronic banking, guess what? You have their bank account number. You have sensitive information. So it really
Yep.
doesn't matter what size you are.
Totally.
On that, like I said, once more, thank you very much, Richie, and as well for our partners. If you guys want to get in touch with us, we did share a few different ways of doing it. We have our new specialists booking link, and on the slide right here, we have the main number where you can reach us at if you have any inquiries. And as usual, we would definitely love to hear from you on this presentation. So please give us your feedback, because we really want to deliver the best value, the best product for you. And we're continuously trying to find ways to improve these presentation and to make them valuable and pertinent to you guys. Is there anything else you wanted to add, Steve? All right, I think we're good. I see a couple of people typing in the chat, so I'm just going to hang on just to see if anyone would have further questions. All right, I see somebody else typing. All right, well, I don't see any other questions at the moment, so I would tentatively say that we are done. So once again, thank you everyone for joining us. Your willingness to spend time with us is very appreciated. And as always, we're always glad that you could join us. And we'll see you on the next one.